Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Eternal Card Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and we are coming up on a brand new set. Eternal Empire of Glass is releasing fairly soon, possibly, I think, before the year is out. Yeah, we are already starting to see some promo cards for it filter in. The announcement happened yesterday, and it sounds like this month is going to be a 4 promo card setup where we are getting a card every week that you can earn for free. We'll be talking about that card and also the previous promo Tayana the Mender in just a moment, but first things first, we're going to review some of the cards from, or at least display some of the cards and speculate wildly on some of the cards from Eternal Empire of Glass. So we have a new storyline, apparently a new dimension potentially, like this is from the same sort of realm as Bastion Rising. We have some shenanigans involving the Queen of Glass, a character who appears to be somewhat shadow magic related, looks a little bit like Vara, but probably is not, considering that some of the previous lore bits have talked about it in terms of like Talir conversing with this character. I think that we are going to be very interested to see what this whole setup comes up with. There's a bunch of new keywords, which we don't know all of the names of yet, but we can certainly try to figure them out. And yeah, for the moment, we're just going to be reviewing each of the cards that's showing up here, and then we're going to talk about all of the free cards that have come out in the last week, as well as the ones that are upcoming for this month. All right, so let's get into it, shall we? There's plenty of cards to break down, and just so little time to do it in. All right, so first off, the big promo card, the Speaking Circle. 6 cost, colorless sight. The enemy player can't have a sight, and the Queen of Glass's agenda, choose between 3 options that cost 3 or less 3 times to set her agenda. So basically, this will give you Discover as an option 3 times. You get to choose between a set of 3 options. They'll all be spells, of course, most likely. I don't believe that you can play things that are not spells off of this card, since sights always play spells, so it should be a set of 3 different spells that cost 3 or less of probably any color and any type. Oddly enough, I think this might actually be more reliable than most sites for reliably playing cards that matter in terms of what it is that you want to do. First off, this is a 6 cost site that has 4 health, which means it's fairly meaty for a site. 5 is typically like the point where the site is actually just very, very hard to kill. 3 is typically the point where it's getting like a little bit in the vulnerable side. 2 is just, you know, like you can kill that with just about anything. But 4 is like in that sort of good zone where it's just got a lot of sort of durability, and that tends to be a pretty powerful setup in terms of like 6 cost sites overall. Because it's using Discover, it means you aren't going to reliably get exactly what you want on the Speaking Circle. You have to play it basically for the card value, but due to the fact that you are getting a Discover, you're much less likely to have what sites often do, which is a wasted spell. You're not going to, for example, have a Meltdown that targets nothing. You're not going to have an Ice Bolt when there aren't any units on the field. You're much more likely instead to get at least something relatively beneficial, whether that's, you know, something very minimal like an Inspire, or some like, you know, minor card draw effect, or anything where it just like maybe like minorly affects a unit. There's a lot of different things that are 2 cost spells that are not insanely good, but the 3 different options should all be options that are relevant to the current situation, generally by the way that randomness works. So you'll have a couple of good choices to play, and once you get them, you do of course set the agenda and bring out the Queen of Glass, which is the card that we're going to be talking about now. So, as a neutral card, this clearly represents a pretty strong value proposition, and people who love neutral decks, I think, once again, all of the pieces are starting to come into place. The next one on that list is a 9 cost 7/7. This is the card that comes out of the site. As you can see, it doesn't have a gem, so it is not a card that you can play yourself. It's a 7/7. It has Unblockable, and in 2 new keywords that we don't know about. One is Regen, and the other one is your other units are awakened and can't die while you have the Queen of Glass. So Awakening, probably something to do with a new like keyword of some type. Hard to say exactly what that's going to be. Regen is also a really curious one. There's a lot of ways that that could go. I don't really know what that's going to be, particularly because obviously if something takes damage, it is already going to regen its health at the end of the turn. So regen probably means something that might cause the card to grow, or cause the card to come back from the void, maybe. Potentially do all sorts of interesting things with itself. We will find out exactly what regen does, I think, in a couple of days, but for now, we get to speculate pretty wildly. Some things to notice about the Queen of Glass is that it is a 9 cost. That's a pretty rare number. I don't remember specifically if cards like Celebration will produce this card, considering that it is not a card that is considered to be like a physical card in the game, but it's something to note because 9 cost is just like a particularly rare number in terms of its overall cost. If this card gets thrown back into your hand by a teleport or something like that, it becomes very, very hard to play because 9 is also very out of reach. But you know, it's just an interesting number and something to keep track of as far as things go. There aren't that many cards that cost 9, apart from Channel the Tempest, our card frame. So yeah, your other units can't die is a pretty useful effect, and if this card's regen ability does in fact give it some sort of resilience to removal, this could potentially be pretty devastating to your opponent. It's also an unblockable unit, so it's got clear reach. There's no way to block it, so like if it's alive and the regen ability is preventing it from getting hit by spells in some way, or preventing it from being removed by damage, something like that, then it's probably going to like just totally wreck your opponent if it comes out over the course of a couple of turns, which is exactly what you want out of Sight. So far, this 6 cost Sight actually looks like it's producing pretty well. Obviously, the main disadvantage to it is that you play the Sight and you have no idea if the Sight is going to do the one thing that Sights always do, which is protect themselves. There are very few Sights in the game that don't protect themselves in some form or another, and this one kind of does that, but it's not reliable. So you can pay 6 for this and then just have it get rolled over by a creature when you get something for 3 that you don't want to play out of a set of 3 different options. But because it's probably going to pick from 3 different spells, and I think it's fairly likely that those 3 different spells are going to have valid targets, like that seems like something where you are going to get value out of this Sight as long as you can stick it on a board where you can actually defend yourself. So notable way to put pressure on your opponent, particularly in a colorless deck. And yeah, very interesting card overall. We're going to have a better evaluation of it as we find out what regen and unblockable do, but other units can't die is a pretty neat effect, and I believe that should persist at least long enough to protect you from a harsh rule until the Queen of Glass is dead, and then after the Queen of Glass dies from the harsh rule, you can harsh rule again. But still, pretty interesting stuff. Okay, next up we have a small spoiler that showed up a little while ago. This is Xumuc Shaman? Xumuc Shaman? Oh my goodness. Alright, here we go. Xumuc Shaman. Okay, come on. Xumuc Shaman. Wow, Xumuc Shaman. Man, I cannot say shaman today. 5 cost, double shadow, 5/5. Already like a pretty beefy unit. When an enemy unit gets negative strength, your units get +2 strength. So effectively, anytime you malediction, you rally, which is pretty interesting. An Amethyst Acolyte will just become a 4/1. Anything where you are putting a negative on your opponent immediately gives you a lot of decent aggression very, very quickly. And if you have some sort of like on attack ability, say for example World Bearer, you can get a lot of damage out very, very quickly and get some pretty like wild stuff from that type of setup. Or is it World Ender? Another 9 cost card, but like if you are attacking and giving your opponent negative effects, like this basically like triggers simultaneously. The question is how many different free triggers we have that actually give negative strength to options, and the World Joiner, that's the card, is the only one that I can think of that is just like immediate and effective negative effect on your opponent. There are plenty of different ways to do it, so like you can certainly just like get away with some stuff like Makar's Quiver and various other like sort of different removal types to sort of get this going. But the main thing about it is that the card is just something that fits really well in most types of aggressive decks and has like a minor Champion of Cunning type effect in Shadow, which is pretty good on like a flyer. On the other hand, it doesn't have Aegis or flying, so it does compare disfavorably to Champion of Cunning, but it is a 5/5 for 5, and I think that's just like a really good stat line for a Shadow card. You don't see that many Shadow cards at 5 with more than 4 health, and like this is something that really kind of gets there in terms of that sort of value. It's a decent little beater that also provides a lot of aggression. Could be really good in like a Stone Scar deck, could also be solid in like a Felon Flyers list. There's a lot of different places where this might fit in, particularly if there is a lot of theming around that negative strength ability. And if that's the case, it'll also be a really, really fun draft card because like there's going to be a lot of different ways that you can make this to be an extremely powerful draft pick that you're probably going to want to grab very, very highly over a lot of other things. Like, if this is just in a draft set with Amethyst Acolyte, then it's going to be a pretty high pick for you because Amethyst Acolyte is a common, and there are a lot of other choices that are going to be similarly effective at triggering that rally effect over and over again. It does say when an enemy unit gets negative strength, so I'm not sure if this will trigger for multiple units. It's a question that I'm not completely answered at the moment, but we may find out a little bit more soon. In any case, the card seems great in draft, great in expedition, probably not super powerful in throne since there's just so many options in this particular setup, but it's something very interesting to be playing around with, and I think it's going to make the limited format very interesting indeed. All right. We have one more from the set proper, and let's go ahead and reveal it. It's actually the background. Deheen Blitz. A 5/3 flying charge with ultimate pay 3 to draw a fire weapon from your market. It is a Valkyrie, another red Valkyrie, so we are going to be seeing a probably flush of red Valkyries in the next set. It seems very likely that there's going to be quite a few of them. This seems to be one of the themes of the world, is that we're going to be seeing Valkyries in red, which means that red-green Valkyries with Ikaria is going to be a really interesting throne deck to be playing around with. There's a lot of different ways that you can potentially get some Valkyrie tribal up in this mix, and Deheen Blitz offers quite a bit. So here's some things that are good about it. One, it's a 5-cost card that deals 5 damage to the opponent's face on the turn that it's played. That's disgusting, actually. Like, there aren't that many cards that deal that much damage at that cost. Obliterate is the one that deals 6 and also addresses units, but this puts a unit on the board on top of that and has the ultimate where you can get an extra card from your market for a minor cost without even having to trade a card for that weapon. So this is a pretty interesting option. The disadvantage of the card, of course, is that low health. If you torch it or something along those lines, then it's going to go down pretty quickly, but there aren't that many fast cards that actually deal 3 damage at the moment at any cost is the primary one in Expedition, and Torch, of course, is no longer a fast spell, so people are not really running that many things that will necessarily deal with Deheen on the turn it's played. In addition, Deheen represents a constant threat of damage in your hand. This is a card that you don't necessarily play immediately. In a red deck where you're trying to reach for reach, you want to play it on a turn where your opponent is completely out of power and unable to deal with the card, because then it's just a guaranteed 5 damage and your opponent has to deal with the card afterwards. That kind of value and that kind of damage makes this a really potential up-and-comer. I'm kind of sad that this one is a legendary, but like at the same time it's obviously really disgusting, so like it's something that you can really get a lot of value at. I think this is going to be one of the must crafts for the set overall. It just seems like something that offers too much in terms of red aggression to be left by the wayside, particularly since it provides card advantage afterwards if you don't deal with it. Paying 8 for this is pretty easy. You can just slap it down, pay the 3 to draw the weapon from your market. You've immediately gotten your value back, and your opponent will not be able to respond to it before that happens. Once you trigger the ability, they may be able to kill the unit, so it will be a 0 for 1. But at 8, this card provides you with value. At 5, this card is insanely good at just giving you a lot of damage. Consider Thunder of Wings, the 5 cost that generates a 4/1 with flying and charge. It is a 3 cost normally, but you do have to sacrifice opportunity cost with a unit. But at 5, that card is usually devastating, even though the 4/1 is a 4/1. Deheen Blitz is a 5/3. It's significantly more durable than that kind of flyer at 5, and it has a little bit of extra value on top of it. I think this card is actually really, really powerful. So there's a lot that you can do with it, despite its vulnerabilities. It's clearly a very good balance of damage and risk, but I think that like the damage and overall stats of it may actually lead to it being nerfed in the future, depending on what it goes. It's great in Throne, it's great in Expedition. You would love to see this in Draft. It's just a hot bonkers card in any setup, and thus far the most powerful card that has been previewed so far. Seems really, really good. Really excited about that one. Alright, but especially if you're a Spike. Okay, so we did not review Tayana the Mender, or rather I did review Tayana the Mender, and then I messed up, so I forgot to like put the video up. So we're gonna talk about that before we talk about the other promo card that's coming out today. But yeah, I've been meaning to do that. Oh, hello. We're moving the wrong things around. Okay, so Tayana the Mender was the promo card that came out last week, and there is now a new promo card out for this week, which we're also going to be discussing. But real quick, let's give a quick shout out to Tayana, a 3-cost 2/2 that at the end of each turn draws each non-weapon relic that went to your void and has summoned. You may silence a relic. This is a card that everybody should have gotten last week, but I'm just going to review it now because we skipped it. So yeah, this will effectively give you the ability to destroy an opponent's relic. It also allows you to draw non-weapon relics back from your void. Because of that stat line, I don't think this card is insanely powerful, but it is good at providing interaction to relics in a color that isn't normally able to do it. So provided you can reach for both sides of that, and even if you aren't necessarily getting that draw every time in a game, you can get some decent value out of this card. I think it's an average strength option that provides you with some reasonable interaction and makes a really great market choice just because of the ability to silence that relic. If you are able to play a deck that actually uses sacrifice relics or plays around with like discarding things in such a way that you might actually get those relics back, such as, for example, our Beacon of the Reach deck, Rainbow Bright. This is something where you can actually like get your beacons back after tossing them to Shavka's Embrace and have a lot of fun with that. It's a pretty interesting way to fetch Distortion Orbs and other stuff after getting them tossed with Okessa and Shavka's Embrace and that kind of stuff. So that's a really, really fun sort of aspect to it. And of course you can mill your own weapons to bring them into your hand. There's a lot of different ways that you can play with that ability. I do think that because of that stat line, a 2/2 for 3 is just not very good in Expeditionary Throne. You do need to actually get that draw ability to really benefit from Tayana and pull that sort of edge that you need over an opponent, even if it does offer the silence on top of that. Face Aegis is just terribly common, so this card is not always going to provide anything more than popping an Aegis and playing a 2/2, and so you really need to have like all three aspects of it, the body, the summon effect, and the end of turn ability to be firing for this card to get real value. But it does provide quite a bit of real value provided you can do that, so it's an interesting option. That leads us to today's promo. This is for the next week, and then the week after that there will be a new promo, which we haven't seen yet. But there's going to be one every single week in December, leading up to this brand new set. So get excited, everyone. Our first one is Dichro's Ruin. Dichro's Ruin is another cursed relic. When the cursed player draws an additional card, deal 1 damage to them and gain 1 health. So very easy way to immediately trigger an Aegis pop, provided that they, of course, didn't get an Aegis when you played Dichro's Ruin. And also something that will punish players for playing control pretty effectively due to the fact that it's going to put pressure on them and put your health in an area where control players are going to be a little bit less happy to deal with it. A lot of control decks kind of limit their damage due to the fact that they generally don't have to worry too much about people gaining health. So, you know, like dealing a little bit, gaining a little bit every time that they draw cards ends up being really, really handy, as well as that damage pressure tends to sort of weigh on them as well. I think that basically what this does is it makes control have to focus on a lot of different areas, lest they get burned down too quickly or get like a little too much health on your opponent and then have to like do more damage. They have to focus on both health gain and dealing damage when all they really want to be doing is focusing on removing cards and drawing cards. So this is something where like basically they're going to get some good benefits from it, but like it's not necessarily something that they're going to be seeing an amazing amount of value from either way. So yeah, dealing 1 and gaining 1 health is okay. Like certainly when like it's certainly not an amazing effect, and it can be blocked by Face Aegis, which is always the general problem with cursed relics, but at 2 that's a pretty reasonable option. The other thing that this says is when one of their units deals damage when the turn it was played, kill it. So this feels like a notable response to Sling of the Chi, which I don't believe gives you the option of not dealing the damage. But like basically it just immediately kills anything that comes out and deals damage on the turn it's played. Anything with charge, anything that like perhaps like is going to trade with your stuff. killer effects, anything along those lines. So it punishes charge, punishes killer, and it punishes Sling of the Chi specifically. All three of those things are hurt by Dichro's Ruin, making it a very solid market card due to the fact that it is basically addressing a number of different meta decks on different aspects. It wants to hurt killer cards, it wants to hurt card draw, it wants to hurt just a wide variety of different things, and it can do that all for fairly cheap, so it's a pretty simple card to swap in with a market. I expect that the big Shadow Legendary of the next set is going to have the ability to pay 3 and grab a curse from your market. I think that, like, if you are going to expect that big red legendary to be part of a cycle, and since it is a market card, I really expect it to be part of a cycle, I would say that the Shadow one is very likely to be able to grab Dichro's Ruin, which is going to make it a really easy shoe-in for a market. Mainboarding this card, I'm not sure that I'm terribly certain that it's going to be good. It does make Nightfall deal more damage and heal you, effectively just completely eliminating the disadvantage of Nightfall on turn 2, which means that you can play a pretty heavy Nightfall deck and get quite a bit of advantage out of Dichro's Ruin, while also, of course, negating killer effects and doing all of the other stuff that this card does to decks that want to do a lot of different things. You can force extra card draw, and that is something that Dichro's Ruin can very much give you some advantage with. I think that's probably the best intent for it, so if you want to build like a Throne Nightfall deck to try that out, I don't think that's going to be a super powerful deck in the immediate short term, but in Expedition, it's very possible that Nightfall might come back, and if that's the case, then this is something that like really could prove to be pretty interesting as a main board option. Until then, though, I would relegate this specifically to the market. It's a good market choice to sort of mess with your opponents for doing things that they really want to do. Of course, you have to watch out for transpose, which is kind of everywhere right now, but I would say that this is something that really does provide you with a lot of good sort of value and give you something that you can force into your opponent's space and make terrible things happen. All right, so that is, I believe, all of our cards for today. We will be talking more about the upcoming promos as they come out, and we will also be talking about upcoming spoilers as they come out. The spoilers are, of course, going to be up for purchase in the community store. You will have to have fast fingers and a lot of influence, but if you manage to get one, congratulations to you. Feel free to share that along however you like, and we will review it, of course, on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I am on Twitch, Patreon, and Twitter, and you can find me in all of those places, and I will see you all next time with more Eternal Card breakdowns. Cheers, everyone. Bye.